I'm Alex Wagner.
And I'm John Heilman. And with all due respect to Donald Trump, we heard about your Minnesota ballot troubles, and you should have known. A lot of weird stuff happens up there. Oh, yeah, you betcha. we got a good show being made. All right. Okay. After a week of being hammered over her family foundation, Hillary Clinton was back on offense today, calling BS on Donald Trump's latest efforts to soften his rhetoric and reach out to minority voters. This afternoon in Reno, Nevada, the Democratic nominee devoted her speech to reminding the world of Trump's unseemliest remarks and retweets, dubbing him a hero of the alt-right, a loud and virulent part of the conservative movement fueled by white nationalism.
From the start, Donald Trump has built his campaign on prejudice and paranoia. He is taking hate groups mainstream and helping a radical fringe take over the Republican Party. And let's not forget that Trump first gained political prominence leading the charge for the so-called birthers. He promoted the racist lie that President Obama is not really an American citizen. The de facto merger between Breitbart and the Trump campaign represents a landmark achievement for this group, a fringe element that has effectively taken over the Republican Party. And this is part of a broader story, the rising tide of hardline right-wing nationalism around the world. So no one should have any illusions about what's really going on here. The names may have changed. Racists now call themselves racialists. White supremacists now call themselves white nationalists. The paranoid fringe now calls itself alt-right. But the hate burns just as bright. This is a moment of reckoning for every Republican dismayed that the party of Lincoln has become the party of Trump.
A few hours before that, the Clinton campaign released this incendiary web video that features a Ku Klux Klan wizard praising the Republican nominee.
The reason a lot of Klan members like Donald Trump is because a lot of what he believes, we believe in. Donald Trump would be best for the job.
For president.
Yeah.
I am a farmer and white nationalist. Support Donald Trump.
Sending out all the illegals, building a wall, and a moratorium on Islamic immigration. That's very appealing to a lot of ordinary white people.
Donald Trump himself was holding a roundtable with minority groups this morning in New York when that video dropped. Later, he responded at a rally in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Hillary Clinton is going to try and accuse this campaign and all of you and the millions of decent Americans who support this campaign, your campaign, of being racists, which we're not. To Hillary Clinton and her donors and advisors, pushing her to spread smears and her lies about decent people, shame on you.
The Trump campaign also put out a statement saying, quote, Hillary Clinton's attempt to delete the single worst week of her political career isn't going to work. Alex, who is winning this fight today?
I gotta give it to Clinton just by virtue of the fact that I thought that was one of the toughest speeches she's given this election cycle. She invoked white supremacy, bigotry, racism, paranoid fever dreams. I mean, look, charges of corruption and cronyism in the Clinton Foundation are tough. But saying that Donald Trump is dangerously outside the mainstream of normalcy, set aside American politics, just the very basic foundations of the democracy, those are very tough charges. In combination with an ad that features someone in Klan garb, that's as tough as you're going to get, I think, in American politics.
It is not something that we have seen in our politics in our lifetimes. Just like the Trump campaign is not something we have seen in politics in our lifetimes. I will say, the Trump campaign, I think, is wrong. I don't think this is the worst political week of Hillary Clinton's life, for one thing, although it was not a good week for the few days. They have gotten very good at flipping the bit, at getting people to focus on Trump because he gives them so much ammunition. She has done a few of these speeches in the past. The foreign policy speech she gave in California where she went after his temperament. This speech, though, was off the charts in terms of its toughness. And this is the key thing. All the Trump people
supporters, voters, people in the country, they're not racist. They're not all part of the alt-right. But the alt-right is behind Donald Trump. And there are plenty of people who are supporters of Donald Trump who are white nationalists, outright racists, xenophobes. There's a lot. They're out there. There's a lot of evidence to work with. And what she is trying to do is she's trying to say, as she said there, to regular Republicans, traditional Republicans, you don't want to be in bed with these people.
And those are the people both campaigns are trying to speak to this week.
Right.
Normal Republicans who feel like they don't have a place in the Trump campaign. His minority outreach is in large part directed at them. Hillary Clinton's speech today was directed to moderate Republicans.
Right. This is the whole thing about this. This is, again, we've talked about it all week long. Donald Trump trying to talk to largely college-educated white women with his speeches about that are ostensibly to African Americans and Hispanics. That is what that speech is about there too. It's ginned up a ton of coverage today. It will gin up a ton of coverage tomorrow. But the real intended message there is to say, don't let you suburban white women in Philadelphia, don't be fooled by what you're hearing from Donald Trump right now. Remember, not just what Donald Trump has said, but the people who he has surrounded himself with.
She quoted Maya Angelou, when people show you who they are, believe them. Okay, a new national poll by Quinnipiac University came out today. It shows Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump by 10 points, 51 to 41%. But it was another survey by the Pew Research Center that really caught our eye. It suggests that aspects of Donald Trump's immigration plan are out of step with many of the nation's voters. 61%, for instance, said they oppose building a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border, which is maybe why Trump seems to be about as confused as everyone else when it comes to his new posture on immigration. In a Fox News town hall that aired last night, the Republican nominee playfully asked the audience 3 times to vote on how to handle the estimated 11 million undocumented men and women living in the United States, in what Jenna Johnson of the Washington Post aptly described as, quote, game show style polls on the fate of human beings. So has Trump changed his position? Or, as always, we turn to his spokeswoman, Katrina Pearson, to clear things up.
He hasn't changed his position on immigration. He's changed the words that he is saying.
In this case, Pearson is kind of sort of right, at least about Trump's word change. Thanks to our friends at Morning Joe, here's the evolution of Trump's stance on the issue over the past few months.
They have to go out, and they'll come back, but they're going to have to go out.
Come on, folks. We all know you can't pick them up and ship them back across the border. It's a silly argument.
Dwight Eisenhower. They moved 1.5 million people out. We have no choice.
Are you going to have a massive deportation force?
You're going to have a deportation force, and you're going to do it humanely.
If you're president, what will you do for those members that are of our fabric of our country that have been here for 25 years undocumented?
They're going to go, and we're going to create a path where we can get them into this country legally.
But
otherwise, we don't have a country.
First,
they're going to be, and they're going to come back.
Somebody that's been in the country for 20 years has done a great job, has a job and everything else. Okay, do we take him and the family, her or him or whatever, and send him out? They'll pay back taxes. They have to pay taxes. But we work with them.
This is not the only position Trump took during the nomination contest that now seems to be untenable. Last night on Rachel Maddow's show, Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway struggled to rectify her boss's original Muslim ban with his current proposal, and she could not specify exactly who Trump was apologizing to when he expressed regret last week. Trump and his campaign now seem to be facing 2 unpalatable choices. Either they double down on unpopular policies or risk being labeled as flip-floppers. John, which one to choose?
You can't have, a lot of politicians try to have it both ways. It's a time-honored tradition in presidential politics to try to have it both ways. These are egregious efforts to try to have it both ways. To ostensibly say what Kellyanne Conway said last night, which was, well, his Muslim ban, look at both of them. They're all part of a continuum. They kind of explain themselves. You know, he expressed regret in general, so anybody who's been offended should take that as an apology. And then this immigration thing, which is the flip-flop to end all flip-flops. You look at that video, it makes I was before the war, before I was against the war, look like you're playing with kindling or matchsticks or something. It's horrible. And I don't know which he really believes. I have no idea what Trump actually believes about immigration. He may believe nothing about it, but I think that is such an egregious flip-flop that he is going to pay just a terrible, terrible price for it, even with people on the far right and people in the middle of the country who will remember exactly what he said back in the fall.
And keep in mind in that interview that Kellyanne Conway bravely did, I thought, because it is almost an impossible position that she is in.
She is.
With Rachel Maddow, at one point, you know, up on the screen pops on Trump letterhead the calling for a complete and total ban on Muslims entering the United States, written by Donald Trump, released to the national press, and made a national news story by Donald Trump. And this is the price you pay, right? You cannot etch-a-sketch away something written on your own letterhead.
Etch-a-sketch
you're
reference.
welcome for that.
Man, Throwback Thursday.
Exactly. The idea, I mean, there is no nuance there, and that is now the problem for the campaign.
I think there's a chance that, you know, if you think about how toxic the positions that he took are, if the better thing, it seems to me, if you're going to have to be labeled a flip-flopper, is actually flip-flop and just declare it and say, you know what? I was wrong before. I've learned more. I've talked to more people in the country. I've come to a different point of view. Just admit it. You're going to take a big hit for that, but at least you're not going to be painted as someone who's trying to do what it seems like he's trying to do, which is, as you say, to pretend like all that stuff on which his campaign was built never happened.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, I think that they must have some kind of internal numbers that suggest to them if they forsake these base voters who are very, you know, excited about the wall and the ban, then they plummet to a level that is from which it is unrecoverable.
Well, yes, and I think they are betting that the people who love Donald Trump are not going to go anywhere. That those people are going to stay, and they will put up with what seemed to be. Ann Coulter the other night said he can back away from anything, he can pivot away from anything, but he can't pivot away from immigration. I think they're betting that Ann Coulter is an outlier there, and that his people will still be with him. But boy, he has just put himself in a horrible, horrible place politically. And when we come back, the Clinton campaign's chief strategist, Joel Benenson. It's a real honor to see Joel here. He'll be right here in our studio on this set after these words from our sponsors.
Fresh off Hillary Clinton's scathing critique of Donald Trump and the alt-right, we are joined now by Democratic pollster and senior strategist to Clinton's campaign, Joel Benenson, the great Joel Benenson. Thank you for your time,
Thank you,
Joel.
Alex. Thanks.
Important man in an important time for Hillary Clinton. The Donald Trump campaign seems to be suggesting that the speech today was all about trying to pivot away from Hillary Clinton's worst week in politics.
No, look, I think Donald Trump has been reeling. The wheels are coming off the campaign. He's on his third campaign manager already, the guy who claims he, hires the best people in the world. I think that we're in a phase now where the stakes in this election have to be put front and center before the American voters and before the American public. He's been trying to make some statements that, whether he's been fed them by advisors or, somebody unbeknownst to him is putting him in his teleprompter, who knows? But the reality is we're going to hold him to account for the positions he's taken that have been divisive, that have been dividing Americans, that have been hateful, and we're going to hold him to account for those for the next 75 days of this campaign.
Joel, is Donald Trump a racist?
I think when this first came up and Hillary Clinton said, I don't know what's in his heart, I think that's an accurate statement. But what we do know is he has made racist comments. Paul Ryan said his comments about the judge were the definition of racism, of a racist statement. I think when you have been hauled into court by the Justice Department for engaging in housing discrimination and stamping the letter C on people's applications because they're African American or Latino, I think those actions are racist.
In a country, though, where we don't practice slavery anymore, where racism isn't generally, they're not actions that are clear demonstrations other than people's words. If you make racist statements over and over again, is that not the definition of being a racist?
Well, look, I'll let you judge that. I don't have to make that judgment. What I feel comfortable saying and doing, and I think what our campaign feels comfortable saying and doing, is holding up all the hateful statements that he has engaged in, that he has participated in, and the people that he's trafficking in. I think, Hillary Clinton made a point today. He took a tweet from a known white supremacist, racist guy and takes a guy with a dozen followers and tweets it out to 1 million people. Right? It's just behavior that flies in the face of our values as Americans and as a country.
Let me just have one quick follow-up, just because it's on the same line of asking the question. So Donald Trump's followers, right? His voters, right? What's the size? I mean, is a substantial amount of his support from out front racists? Is that your view?
No. Look, I think that. There are a host of reasons why people are probably voting for Donald Trump. I am not going to try and quantify anything about his supporters. I think we know that, first of all, in a presidential election, there are a lot of people who say they don't agree with a lot of what Donald Trump says, and they're voting for him. But I think there are a lot of people who are appalled at many of the things he says, and I think we're going to keep speaking to those voters. I think when you have kids at a basketball game playing, and the other team's students at the high school are shouting, build that wall and speak English. You are the leader of this country. You have to set a tone for everybody. And Donald Trump has proven over and over again he is just completely and temperamentally unfit to be president of the United States. And what we talked about today and what Hillary Clinton talked about today, this is part of that story. When you are dividing people, when you are using those kinds of comments, you are not fit to be president of the United States.
When you talk about the tone, was there any trepidation about using the image of a Klan member in a campaign ad?
I think it was a video that got released today. I think it was
a web video.
A web video. I think the fact is that when you align with some of the people he's aligned with, Stephen Bannon, Breitbart, where they have created a home base for these people. They are recirculating their garbage, and then Donald Trump starts recirculating their garbage. I think what the content of the video speaks for itself. I think you shouldn't be trafficking in that stuff. And if you're a presidential candidate of the Republican Party, right, I think it's disgraceful. And I think it shows that he's unfit to be president. And I think it's fair game to say.
So there was no trepidation about using a hooded Klan member?
I think you have considerations about everything. But let's be clear. We're talking about a guy who looked into the camera when he was asked about David Duke and David Duke supporting him and David Duke stoking up people in his favor. And he says, I don't know anything about David Duke. Those are Donald Trump's words. Do you really believe that a 70-year-old man running for president of the United States doesn't know anything about David Duke? From a man who said last week, I will always tell you the truth. I guarantee you he knows everything he has to know about David Duke, and to traffic in this stuff is what makes it even worse.
Let me ask you a political question, right? You guys have spent
I thought these were all political questions.
I'll ask you a strategy question.
These are the softballs.
Okay, a strategy question?
Strategy question. You guys have run a lot of ads, millions of dollars worth of ads in this campaign. Priorities has run millions of dollars worth of ads. They've been pretty consistent. What they haven't talked about is this stuff. They've talked about Trump's temperament. They've talked about his unfitness for the office and his lack of qualifications. They've attacked him on various things. You haven't gone after him in the way that you did in this web video before. So are we going to see
that kind of the stuff we saw in this web video in paid advertising soon?
I think there have been advertising about some of the odious comments he's made about people. I think there have been ads from some folks.
But not featuring a Klansman. And that's been around. It's been around for a while. So are we going to see that or not? Are we going to see it?
No, but there has been featuring of his hideous language towards women, calling women pigs and disgusting. His mocking of a disabled reporter.
I'm not saying your ads haven't been tough, Joel. I'm just asking you the question. Are we going to start to see imagery like we saw today featuring Klansmen?
First of all, I'm not going to tell you what we'll show in the future. What I will say is we will keep highlighting the more hateful his statements are, and they continue to be so. His speech last week to African Americans was a disgrace. He continues to denigrate and stereotype in the worst way in a population that is still struggling, still striving for equality, but also making gains, building communities, educating kids in their neighborhoods. We're going to highlight the hateful statements he makes, whoever they're about.
Joel, we have so many more questions for you. Luckily enough, we've stapled
I'll
you
hang
to the
around a bit,
chair,
Alex.
and we're going to come back right after this commercial break and continue the conversation.
We're back with Joel Benenson, the Clinton campaign's chief strategist and previously President Obama's lead pollster. Joel, thanks for sticking around. I want to ask you, I don't want to spend a lot of time on foundation-related stuff because you've been on TV, you've answered a lot of these questions, but I do want to ask you a political question about it, right? A lot of Democrats yell at us and say, no one cares about these matters. No one cares, right? All the polling that I've seen, including the Bloomberg Politics National poll we did, which showed that more than half of the country is bothered a lot by the foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation. More than half the country is worried about the way she handled her email. Suggests to me at least that it's not true that no one cares about it, that in fact, a decent chunk of people. So you're a numbers guy, right? Is it really the case that this is an issue that bothers no one, or that it bothers no one of remaining available votes that are out there to be got?
Well, I mean, look, the last point you made is one that's true, and I'm not going to judge what voters think or don't think about issues. What it does say is, and you've looked at poll numbers as well, there are very few people left who haven't made up their mind. Right. And we are competing for those votes. We're competing very hard for those votes. At the same time, you have to keep your own votes. Look, this is an issue we've addressed in the last couple of days. Hillary Clinton addressed it again last night, said, you know, no excuses, reminded people a year ago she apologized, said it was not the right decision. I think what happens in the next, 10 or weeks that we have to go here, I think voters are going to listen to a debate about their lives. I think they're going to focus on that more. I always say that they do. And I think they're going to make a determination about these two people and which one of them can they count on to make a real difference in their lives going forward.
I know you said you weren't going to tell me what voters think, but this is your gig, right? That's what you've done your whole career, study what voters think about issues. So do you have
For my
a sense?
Clients, I do that, John.
You're not one of them.
Do you have a sense that among available voters out there, available votes that are up for grabs, that this issue does not matter or matters a little or matters a lot?
I think people have factored it in. I think they've digested the information. They have factored it into the totality of what they have heard from these two people. And they're making their judgments based upon it. Don't forget, you had tens of millions of viewers tune in and watch conventions a few weeks ago, where people had 4 days. Both campaigns had 4 days to lay out their message, lay out their argument to the American people. They've heard everything. And all I'll say is they have factored these things in, and they're making a decision right now that the person they can count on to make this country and take this country where we want it to go and make their lives better is Hillary Clinton.
Let me ask you maybe the same question, but in a different way. Is it your opinion that Hillary Clinton has reached the ceiling on her unfavorables?
I think you just asked the same question in a different way.
But that's sort of the same question, but sort of different question.
Look, I think if you look at the trend in polling, what's been happening is actually that Hillary Clinton's numbers on her favorable, unfavorable are getting better. Donald Trump's favorable, unfavorables have been getting worse.
So maybe yes, she has reached the ceiling.
You know, look, I think if you communicate a positive, optimistic to voters about where you want to take this country, how you're going to do it, tell them how that impacts their lives, I think you'll improve your favorables, and I think that's what we're doing. I think Donald Trump, on the other hand, by the way, he came out of his convention, his numbers are getting worse, and I think you have to think about that. He's as known to the American people right now as Hillary Clinton. You know, they're seeing both of these people every day. He's doing and saying some things that are making his numbers worse. I can't explain that totally. Can explain it to some degree. I think it has to do with some of the hateful rhetoric we're talking about, the tone of his campaign, maybe some of the disarray. I can't tell you in what proportion. And I think her numbers are improving because she is telling people what she's going to do for them, how she's going to get it done, and how that'll help their future.
Joel Benenson, apparently I am not a client of yours. That was one of the things I learned
That was clear long ago,
You got to pay for the answer to that, apparently.
Thank you for coming in. You're
Thank you for having me.
Good man. We'll check in on the Trump campaign after this quick break.
The letter of the day is J. because with us now is Jennifer Jacobs and Jenna Johnson, who both cover Donald Trump's presidential campaigns and who both join us now from D.C. Jenna, let me ask you first. Hillary Clinton gave a very tough speech today about Donald Trump and the alt-right. To what degree has the Trump campaign known this was coming, and to what degree are his activities of today and tomorrow intended to mitigate some of the damage or fallout from that?
Yeah, I mean, they've been expecting an attack like this. And in her speech, she laid out example after example of all of these things that could be in attack ads, that his rivals during the primaries went after him on. She laid it all out. He gave a speech right before she did in New Hampshire and tried to kind of beat her to some of these things. He walked through a lot of his controversial positions, you know, calling for restrictions on immigration from Middle Eastern countries or countries with terrorism, his call for a wall, some of his immigration positions. And basically he said, you know, how dare she paint my supporters as being racist for backing these positions that he says keep people safe, keep people alive, and they might be controversial, they might not be politically correct, but he says that this is what he has to do to keep people safe.
Jennifer Jacobs, the minority meeting, minority outreach meeting that Donald Trump held this morning before, were really kind of simultaneous with the web video that the campaign put out, was striking in the sense that, unlike just saying kind of nihilistic things to African Americans like, what do you have to lose? He actually talked about some substance. So talk about what the derivation of that is, the financial discrimination against African Americans, that piece of the puzzle.
Right. I talked to some conservative black leaders today who were really appreciative that he brought that up. It was a roundtable meeting with some minority activists, and one of them asked him, you know, what he would do about discriminatory lending practices, and he came back and affirmed that he agrees that that's a big problem. He said that, you know, people with good jobs and good credit go in to get loans and they can't get them, and he said this is a real problem. He's been hearing this a lot, so he was saying, I'm hearing this from real people. I'm really going to take a look at it. He made a commitment to study it. And so, you know, these black leaders are saying this was a divergence from all the name calling and the pandering and just the beating each other up on race issues that we saw today. This was a side example of Trump saying, I would like to do something about this, have my research people look into this and come up with some solutions to discriminatory lending problems. And so people have been appreciative of that. He did not mention that later on in the day in his speech in New Hampshire, but I think people are going to hold him to that promise that he wants to look into this.
Jennifer, let me follow up on that. And in as much as Donald Trump has been meeting with Hispanic conservatives and black conservatives in the last week, a lot of folks think that really this message is tailored to moderate Republican women who may be scared off by Donald Trump's message. To what degree is the campaign sort of owning that or denying that?
I did have a couple of campaign aides say that there is some legitimacy to the idea that they're trying to reassure jumpy establishment voters. Interestingly, maybe Hillary Clinton is targeting that same audience. She's trying to snatch up the GOP establishment and make them shy away from Trump. Trump is trying to justify his campaign and make those GOP establishment voters less nervous about him by saying, listen, just because you want a secure border doesn't mean you're a racist. Just because you support police and law and order doesn't mean that you're prejudiced. Just because you want to do something about radical Islamic terrorism doesn't mean you're an Islamophobe. So he's trying to reassure those same voters that she's trying to peel away. So yes, they do, but they also do say that this is a sincere effort to appeal to minority voters as well. They say, you know, take us at our word. We are really trying to reach out to blacks and Hispanics and get that vote.
Jenna, let me ask you, you wrote about Donald Trump's immigration speech last night, the stuff he talked about, which the Hannity event. We played this morning Joe clip that kind of laid out the evolution where Trump started last year and where he is now, from deportation force and behind, like, it was supporting Dwight Eisenhower's Operation Wetback to now basically adopting Jeb Bush's position. Where's the campaign on that? Are they denying that this has happened, that he's changed his tune considerably, or are they owning that?
You know, they're being very careful about this. They're saying that he hasn't changed his position, but when you really push them on it, they say that, you know, he might be willing to change his position. You know, as far as where he stands, I don't exactly know. He has not put out any piece of paper with a statement saying, this is what I believe about mass deportations. And one thing I've learned about Donald Trump is until you have that sort of PDF evidence, it's hard to really hold him to that being his stance. But he has said a lot of words that are buzzwords in this debate. You know, he talked about, you know, helping people out, having them pay taxes. You know, these buzzwords that appeared in Jeb Bush's positions that we used to hear Marco Rubio saying on the campaign trail. So to a lot of people, his stance has changed. There's no going back. But at the end of the day, like, I haven't seen a PDF saying that he has changed his position.
You haven't seen the statement on Trump letterhead, which is proven to be problematic for him in the past.
Yes,
Jays of the day, Jennifer Jacobs, Jenna Johnson, thank you both. When we come back, we will talk with Mitt Romney's former senior strategist. And if you are watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
With us now is Stuart Phineas Stevens, former senior strategist to Mitt Romney's 2012 campaign. He joins us now from Annapolis, Maryland. Stuart, I'm going to ask you a question. We always know you come on this show, you're a brilliant man, and you are never Trump. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. Now, if you weren't never Trump, if you were in some way having to advise Donald Trump, and you faced the challenge that he currently faces, a really unpopular set of positions on things like immigration, say, and you wanted to try to make a kind of change that would put him in a better place, how would you advise him to do that? And given what your advice would be, how do you think they're doing at it right now?
Listen, I think the Senate candidates out there who are doing much better than Donald Trump are a good model of how to handle this. I think in all these battleground states, the Republican Senate candidates are running considerably ahead of Donald Trump. As far as I can tell, most of them are talking about jobs and the economy, issues that more affect people's daily lives. This notion that the Trump campaign or Donald Trump seems to have that crime is a critical issue at this moment, or even that Americans are walking around in constant fear of ISIS, just doesn't, it's just not true. And I think that's part of the reason it's not resonating.
Stuart, on the flip side, if you were advising the Clinton campaign, what should she be doing about the foundation and press conferences in general?
It's a mess. I think she ought to have press conferences. I think the foundation is something that they should just get out of. Let other people run it. Turn it over to other people. If it's doing good work, it can do good work under other stewardships. Just break any connection to the foundation.
Looking at this day that's played out, Stuart, with the Clinton campaign going after Donald Trump for his associations with the alt-right, putting up a pretty fiery web video tying him to the Klan. Do you think that, as an analyst, are you looking at that saying they are really just trying to turn the page and win a news cycle? Or do you think they're headed into a new phase in the campaign where this is going to become a more central element of their strategy?
Look, there's a tremendous problem that Donald Trump has with white voters. These latest numbers, he's getting has half the lead that Mitt Romney had in white voters. Mitt Romney won white voters 59%. Donald Trump's doing much worse, and particularly with white educated college and more voters, and particularly with women. I think it's a smart strategy on behalf of the Clinton campaign to try to separate Donald Trump from other Republicans. It would be a mistake for them to go out and say Donald Trump is like all Republicans, which would be one way to go. Instead, they're saying Donald Trump doesn't represent the best of the Republican Party. Here are examples of those who rejected what this so-called alt-right, which I think is just rebranded racism, stands for. I think that's very smart.
Stuart, there are officially, I think, 74 days left until the election. As you look at the landscape, though, as a strategist, how much time truly is there left for each of these candidates to change, pivot, et cetera?
It gets harder. I think you're going to have the debates as a big moment, though historically debates rarely alter the outcome of an election. They can alter dialogue in an election. They can move numbers slightly. The big number, I think, in this race is Donald Trump's favorability. All these polls have him around 35%, some a little lower, some a little higher. You can, as a candidate, you can overperform your favorables, but there's a limit to it. I mean, just think about it. How many people are going to have an unfavorable view of a candidate and still vote for that person? Donald Trump is still running against Donald Trump. And until they come to grips with that, they're just not open. There's just a huge part of the country that is not open to anything that Donald Trump has to say. He needs to talk more about himself and about Donald Trump and what he would do. I think he needs to be more specific in his regrets so that it has some actual meaning and resonance with people. And then I think Americans will always give someone a second chance, but only if they ask and say that they need it.
Stuart, you mentioned the debates, and we're at a place now where people are starting to talk about debate prep. You were very involved in Mitt Romney's debate prep. He did pretty well in his first debate against Barack Obama. What advice would you give Hillary Clinton as she starts thinking about how to prepare to take on Donald Trump in that first debate?
Well, you know, debates are like most things in life. The best practice is to have done it, and she's done a lot of these now, and I think that's really going to help her going into these debates. Everybody has a different strategy, and I've done this going back to then Governor Bush's. And it was very interesting when I did Governor Bush's debate prep and Dick Cheney's debate prep. They had very different approaches, but both worked for him. Vice President Cheney loved to have run-throughs at the exact hour that the debate would have. George Bush hated it. I think to take time is very important. Understand this is a very important moment and dedicate the time and focus needed to really get ready for it.
All right.
I'm sure they're going to do that in the Clinton campaign. I doubt they're going to do that in the Trump campaign.
All right, Stuart Stevens, we will talk to you more about this topic in the future when we get closer to those actual debates. If you're looking for some late summer reading, check out Stuart's incredible political novel, prescient and topical. It's called The Innocent Have Nothing to Fear. When we come back, some nonfiction and a Republican nominee revealed. And no, thankfully, we are not talking about those naked Trump statues that recently popped up around the country. We will be right back after this.
This week, the Washington Post unveiled a new biography about Donald Trump, a culmination of months of research and reporting on Trump's past that they are calling Trump Revealed. Yesterday, we sat down with the book's authors, Post reporters Michael Krenish and Mark Fisher, and asked them what their book exactly revealed about Donald J. Trump, billionaire.
If people think he's a menace to society, they have this view of him as not knowing very much, being sort of a boorish, coarse guy. If they think that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, they think he's a truth teller. He's the ultimate warrior against the politically correct. I think we managed to brush all of that aside and look at a comprehensive look at who he really is, where he came from, what his principles are, why he is the way he is. And to do that, you have to understand the full life of the man. We sent reporters to his ancestral homes in Germany and in Scotland. We sent reporters to all around the world to his business projects, his hotels and so on, in Kazakhstan and Panama and other places. And what we came up with is a full life, and a guy who has an unusual parental background, an unusual upbringing, a lot of which goes a long way toward explaining why he is the way he is.
I think if I were titling this book now on the basis of that answer, I would have called it A Trump in Full. But Michael, let me ask you this question. There is Mark just made a reference to people. There are people out there who think Trump's basically, they have caricatured views of him, right? I think there are many people on the left, almost all of them, and a fair number of people in conservative circles who think Trump's an idiot. And certainly is has no knowledge about the world, right? What do you say to that? Smart? Knowledgeable? Or no?
Well, John, he's very knowledgeable about the world that he lives in. So he's very knowledgeable about the world of construction, about the business that he's built. And one of the revealing things to me, working on this book with a team of reporters at the Washington Post, was the depths that he reached in his business dealings. So it's known that he had a roller coaster sort of existence. I think what's surprising is that the corporate bankruptcies, not personal bankruptcy as he talks about, but the corporate bankruptcies, well, there were 6 of them, not 4, and 3 casinos, for example, went into corporate bankruptcy. We asked him about this, and he said, well, I consider those 3 bankruptcies one bankruptcy. Well, they weren't. There were 3 separate court bankruptcy proceedings. So he looks at it and tries to prepackage it and tell the public, here's exactly what I did. But there was a real roller coaster quality to his career, and the depth that he plummeted to oftentimes was death-defying. It's amazing that he did survive sometimes, and he did so by sometimes running roughshod over creditors or bondholders or shareholders. And we asked him about this. We said, Mr. Trump, how did this work out? Because you said you only want what was best, for example, for Atlantic City. And he responded, well, at the time I was making the best deal that I could for Donald Trump. I had a saying, he said, and that was survive till 95, because he was afraid that if he couldn't last that long, that he would have to perhaps declare personal bankruptcy and it all would be over. So he had to take a lot of maneuvers that we detail that we go into detail in the book that really bring that to life, how he basically leveraged the difficult situation with the bankers and made a lot of deals that helped him survive.
We know that Trump is notoriously pugnacious and litigious. He has been recently no fan of the Washington Post, and yet you had 20 Washington Post reporters working on this with presumably his cooperation. Can you tell us how that happened?
Yeah, so when we made the deal with Scribner, the publisher, as a courtesy, I called Trump's press secretary, Hope Hicks, a few days before the announcement of the book publicly, and I said, look, we're going to be doing this project. We would love to sit down with Mr. Trump for a series of interviews about his life and really get into all the different aspects of it. And before I could really get the word out, Hope Hicks said to me, you are profiteering off Mr. Trump, and we're not cooperating with this book at all. And she was quite angry about it. Well, 2 or 3 days later, she called back, and she was all peaches and cream and said she'd explained the project to Donald Trump, and he was thrilled about it, and he wanted to cooperate, and he wanted us to come visit him in Trump Tower and spend time with him again and again. And that is the essence of who Donald Trump is. He genuinely believes that all publicity is good publicity. He genuinely believes that he can manipulate reporters whichever way he wants to. And yes, he was generous and gracious with his time, fully cooperative, and yet a lot of times it was hard to get a straight answer from him. There were certain people he wouldn't let us talk to, and he did regularly threaten us with lawsuits. And we know that he sued the author of a previous book for $5 billion, despite the fact that he told us he never read the book.
Tell us a little bit more about his mastery of the New York press and the press writ large, at least in the early stages of this campaign?
From the very beginning of his career, he used the press to create this image of himself as a billionaire, as a rich guy, as a powerful developer who could bring political forces to bear and get projects completed that no one else had been able to do. He picked this up in part from Roy Cohn, the legendary New York lawyer who was his mentor in many ways. And what Cohn taught him was all publicity is good publicity. When you're attacked, counterattack 10 times as hard. And Trump really absorbed this. He had from his mother a sense of himself as a performer, and from his father a sense of himself as a power broker and someone who could force deals to be made. He put it all together with this idea that if he could get himself associated with the prettiest models, the biggest celebrities, Studio 54, that whole scene, that would help create this image of him as someone people wanted to be like, this aspirational aspect to the Trump brand. And he's been building on that ever since, including in this campaign.
I want to ask you about his brother Freddie, the one who died, who was an alcoholic, died very young. What kind of impact did that have, if any, lasting impact on Donald Trump?
Yes, well, Donald Trump talks about several key events in his life that were among the most tragic, and certainly the deaths of his parents, his mother and father, and Fred, and there's also another incident where 3 executives died in a helicopter crash. So the death of Fred was extraordinarily impactful on Donald Trump. Donald Trump looked up greatly to his brother, admired him, says he was a dashing, better-looking man than Donald Trump himself, and yet Donald Trump followed his father's path as a builder, and for whatever reason, Fred Trump decided that he did not want to do that. Fred Trump Jr., he decided he wanted to be a pilot, and Donald looked at that profession and said, how is that different from being a bus driver? He just didn't see the quality and wondered why his brother was not going in the family business. But Fred Trump Jr. was very happy doing that, but he also had a lot of difficulties. According to Donald Trump, he drank, he smoked, he had all sorts of problems, and he died at an early age. So Donald Trump looks at that and says, I learned from that that I never want to take alcohol, and he says he's never had a single drop of alcohol, and that he's never smoked. So he's tried to learn the lessons of his brother, had looked up to him and feels sad about that. But Donald Trump's way is to sort of look at a problem or a crisis and then figure out, well, where do we go from here? And we saw that again and again. Some people watched Donald Trump very close to him who talked to us and said, you know, he would get emotional, but then he would just move on. And they found that astonishing, but they said that was a consistent characteristic for Donald Trump.
Our thanks to Mark Fisher and Michael Kranish. Once again, their book, Trump Revealed, is out now. We'll be right back.
So you got to head over to BloombergPolitics.com right now to see how campaigns are using Snapchat to target young voters. What's up, millennials? Coming up on Bloomberg West, Emily Chang sits down with the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Fox, and a huge, massive, mega thank you to the great Alexandra Sway Wagner for filling in for the equally great Mark Cochran this week. It has been nice.
Tip your servers. Tip your servers. It's been my pleasure. This television experiment is the best thing that's happened to me this week.
The television experience. Just say sayonara quick. Sayonara.
Namaste.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. In Reno, Nevada today, Hillary Clinton criticized Donald Trump for embracing elements of what she describes as the alt-right movement.
Under the guise of outreach to African Americans, Trump has stood up in front of largely white audiences and described black communities in such insulting and ignorant terms.
At a campaign rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, Mr. Trump delivered an unapologetic defense of his policies and his political style.
People who speak out against radical Islam and who warn about refugees are not Islamophobes. They're not.
In Italy, rescue crews continue the search for survivors following yesterday's devastating earthquake. At least 250 people were killed, hundreds more injured. There were more aftershocks today. Former FIFA president Sepp Blatter is appealing a 6-year ban from football. He pledges to accept the verdict of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Blatter denies wrongdoing and authorizing a 2-year $1 million payment to former FIFA Vice President Michael Platini in 2011. From New York, I'm Mark Crumpton. Bloomberg West is next.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, Uber burning through significantly more than $1.2 billion in the first half of the year. We'll take you through the unprecedented losses from the company's latest investor call. Plus, driverless car tech may be racing ahead, but who's writing the new rules of the road? We'll hear from the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Fox, about self-driving regulation. And Could someone hack your pacemaker? We'll take a look at the security vulnerabilities of medical devices and a bold new call from Carson Block. But first, to our lead and mounting financial losses at Uber. On a private conference call with investors, head of finance Gautam Gupta explained that Uber lost more money in the second quarter than it did in the first, totaling more than $1.2 billion.